Hi. Hello, everyone who's joining now. I'm waiting for Brett to join me here, and we're gonna have an interesting interview, hearing some more about her practice shortly. Hey, Brett.
Hey,
Hi,
Alan.
Brett.
Hi.
Hi, the technology worked.
Yeah, good.
Great. So, I think I'll see if some more people join shortly, and then I'll introduce you. I see you're well set up here with all your works that we can show. So I think I will start by introducing Brett now. So I'm here with Brett Gui Xin. She's an artist based in Brooklyn, New York, and Brett studied fashion and textile design. That's her background, but her current practice is very much based around repurposing materials like plastic bags, for examples, and manipulating them using mechanized making, kind of almost working with plastic as if it were textile. And also in the past, you've done a lot of ceramic work and some textiles. So we have lots to talk about. And first, I'd like to talk about the piece you have in our show at Special Special. So we're kind of situating you in this context. So we have a show called Artist Tools right now, of tools made by artists to be used in their own practice, like invented for the individual practice. And Brett has this very cool tool called the Wolverine Claw that I'll show a picture of. And I'm wondering, Brett, if you can tell us a bit more about this tool. Like, oh no, sorry, it's such a large image. But I'm wondering if you can tell us a bit more about it and why it was invented and how you use it in your practice.
Sure. So, hi everyone. Thanks for being here. Um, so, the Wolverine Claw I developed as a method of slicing plastic bags, which I use to then weave and knit and sew with. And you can see some of the examples behind me here. But in order to get that thread, I have to cut all of the material down first. And so originally I was just cutting everything by hand. Um, and it takes a really long time, and it just like started to kind of like hurt my hands. So after a while I was like, oh, I need to make this better and faster and just like more efficient so that I'm able to spend more time making my work and less time just like processing material. So the Wolverine Claw is about 20 razor blades on a dowel that's then just like strapped into this handle, and so you can pull it down through a plastic bag, like the top image there, and get like really nice fine thread. So
Yeah.
that was the idea behind it.
And you invented this because big part of your practice is like, as I mentioned, repurposing plastic bags. And at first you were shredding them by hand, or how did you do it before you made this tool?
Yeah, so I was just cutting with scissors, and I can show you. So it's a plastic bag, and then I cut the handles off and the bottom out, and it just creates this like tube.
Uh-huh.
Um, and so originally I started by just cutting it on a spiral, um, but that took a really long time, and so then I started folding it, and you can fold them and like cut it like a fringe. So if you fold it and then you can just cut and make a fringe, but still it's like a lot of cutting and a lot of labor basically. And so by developing the Wolverine Claw, what I can do is I can tape the top edge of the bag to
Mm-hmm.
a mat and then lay this out flat and then take the claw and just like drag it through. And then
Show a
that,
picture of it here again.
yeah, that will
Yeah,
give
so
me,
you just drag it across like that. And
and then as you can see here, I've got all of my little thread buddies in all my different colors. So yeah.
yeah, it's a very impressive tool and very sharp. We were a bit concerned about how to install it, but we installed it like high up above everyone's head height, kind of, with the razors facing inwards towards the wall. So the Wolverine Claw is a very cool piece and kind of allows you to work with plastic as if it were textile,
Mm-hmm.
manipulating it. And I guess I was wondering because since your background is in fashion, which is deemed as quite a fast-paced and stressful environment, I feel from the outside, and now you're working more with like your hands and you're working slowly with these threads and with ceramics. I wanted to ask you if this is something you sought out to do, to have like a more slow and focused practice after you graduated, if it was kind of a counter reaction to the fast pace of your fashion education.
Definitely. I mean, after I graduated fashion school, I worked in the fashion industry for about 3 or 4 years, and then I was just like, I've had it. No, thank you. Um, and you know, and working in the fashion industry, it's a lot of like digital work. And really, I was looking for something that was more hands-on and tactile, and something that I could really like physically connect with. And so I think moving more into this direction of just seeing what I can make with my hands, and learning these different techniques and like how I can apply them was really a draw for me, and has really like influenced the way that I work and develop my work now.
Yeah, and I remember the last time I spoke with you, you spoke briefly about how it was making things for you in quarantine while New York was under lockdown. And this might have just like helped focus your process more if it's something you do from home and with your hands. How was that?
I mean, I really love the lockdown. Apart from all of the chaos in the world,
Of
uh,
course.
I really enjoy being at home, and I really love just like having like focused time to just really go in on my projects. So yeah, while I've been in quarantine, I've done a lot of quilting. I've done a lot of weaving, with plastic and with fabric, um, yarns and stuff. So I made all new curtains for my apartment.
Out
And
of plastic?
sorry,
Out of plastic?
out of fabric.
I
Yeah,
see.
textiles. But yeah, ooh, and then here I can show you. I made this giant net.
Cool.
So this is all plastic,
Yeah.
and um, it's about 8 feet by 8 feet, um, and it's a hand knotted net, like the way that you kind of would traditionally make a fisherman's net.
Yeah.
Uh, and yeah, I had been looking at different like knotting techniques and kind of how I could apply it because I wanted to try doing something that's not so dense. Like these two weavings behind me, I use just like a traditional flat loom. So here, you can
Portable one.
see. And then I have a couple of them in different sizes. And then I'll like improvise and use like a big sheet of foam core and then like put pins, so I can make different shapes and different scales for the weavings. But yeah, with the net, I was just like, I want to like make something where I can cover as much ground as I can and have it be kind of like a bit more fluid and like open and airy. So what I'd like to do with it is next time I'm able to leave New York City, is go and take it out into nature and then photograph it kind of like in the wind and like in the air and then also like in the water. So
Yeah, it's interesting. I can imagine that would look almost like a found thing that you come across, but it's actually something you've like repurposed and did this whole time-consuming process with.
so
Um,
I'm excited for that.
I wanted to ask you, since we spoke briefly about how you manipulate plastic as if it were textile, and working with textile is quite a traditional way of making, also like using a loom and knitting. And it's primarily seen as like a female tradition of making. And I wanted to know if this was the case like in your home. For me, with a grandma who was always knitting, and I wanted to see if you had the same experience and how that influenced you and your interest with textile.
So definitely, when I was a child, my mom taught me to sew, um, like very young, and so I've been um, definitely like working with fabric and sewing since then. And then I have an heirloom I can show you. So my mom's family is from Hawaii. They're Chinese, but from Hawaii, and there's a tradition there called the Hawaiian crazy quilt.
Hmm.
So this is a pillow, and then I have a quilt that goes with it, but it's all like Hawaiian fabrics that are like quilted together. But so my
Could you hold it up a little higher?
yeah, my grandma and my mom worked on it together. But
Wow.
I don't know if you can see right
Is
now.
this something that is like a finished work, or is it something that you would also add on to?
So I mean, I definitely see it as a finished work. Um, But now that you mention it, I do like the idea of maybe adding on to it.
Neither
Like,
for me, perhaps first.
yeah, no, like make it multi generational. So,
Yeah,
but yeah, I
this
have like a giant quilt that matches it and goes with it. So,
yeah, that's we're gonna talk some about your quilting, your own practice, of coming back to that later in the interview as well. But first, I want to kind of talk about your thinking about plastic because the fact that you do use plastic in these means of textile kind of adds a different layer to it. Like plastic is seen as quite an impermanent material, something we use for takeaway containers or like something that's meant to be disposed of. But when you make these like almost small tapestries, if I can call them, out of it, you add this element of art to it, and art is seen as this like untouchable holy thing. Like you can't really mess with anyone's artwork. Just like with this quilt you showed me, like you would need their permission to add something perhaps. And I wanted to ask you, like, how do you think about plastic and its impermanence and making it into something that is has more value than the material would normally have?
well, I think that's a huge part of my practice. So when I first started working with plastic, I was looking for a new kind of like more challenging material. And I wanted to also be able to recycle because like I'm a big earth nerd hippie and like really believe in like recycling and caring for the planet and not and just kind of like using what we have already and not really like um, creating new materials and just always having this like more. So I want to be able to like use what's kind of like easily available to me and accessible and um, like working with what my skills are with my background in textile, I was able to kind of just seamlessly move into plastic once I figured out how to turn it into a yarn, essentially. Um,
Yeah,
so yeah, so then like once I started doing that, I was able to like manipulate it and kind of create these like tapestries and other like artworks and like for me, I think that's like a really important thing where it's like, oh, I'm able to kind of salvage this material and instead of it just going in the bin and being thrown away, I can turn it into something that's beautiful and permanent and, um, something that's like nice to look at, something that you want in your home. It's not just something that you immediately want to throw away and discard.
Yeah.
You know?
You have a pretty large like plastic bag collection, right? That you have like amassed over the years so you can keep going with your practice. Here's I found on your website is some scanned plastic bags. I guess ask you, what does the ideal plastic bag look like to you? Like,
Oh my
do
god.
you find, or is there something specific you look for in your raw materials with bags?
Yeah, when I'm looking at like plastic bags, I'm usually looking for color. It's really
Mhm,
easy to find like white or black ones, but like the bright colors are really the gems. And then like in the image that you're showing, like the Party City bag, like how it has like different colors in it.
mhm.
When you weave it, like you start getting like the stripes of the colors, and so like that's always really nice too. But yeah, I've like developed this like really weird like sense for them where I can like touch it and I'll be like, ooh, okay, this will be good for like sewing with, this will be good for knitting, this one will be like really good for melting. um it's a very like tactile experience. But
Yeah.
hey Lisa, I see you. Um, when I was in Costa Rica over the holidays, they have these really beautiful pink and white striped grocery bags, and so I tried to pick up as many of those as I could and bring them back. But
Do people sell plastic bags? Like, do your friends collect a bunch and bring them over?
yes. Yeah, I have all of my friends like on the lookout for me, like collecting stuff, and then also like where I work, like I've everyone knows and brings me things. So I have a
That's
huge collection of different colors, and I've also been collecting like mesh and like from like when you buy like lemons in a bag, like all of that.
mm,
So,
yeah.
yeah. Um,
So, what you said about different plastic bags being good for like different ways of manipulating them, it kind of takes us into this other tool you use that I wanted to ask you more about because while you work with like loom, you also kind of do mechanized weaving, and you've shown me this little thing before. And I was wondering if you could tell us what this is.
by Barbie Knit
Ah,
Magic.
yeah, Barbie knit
I
magic.
do. So I have the one that's in the photo there, and then I have this little yellow one. But
Hmm.
these come with me everywhere. When I mentioned that I went to Costa Rica over the holidays, I took this with me, and um, and
Right.
was knitting the whole time. But um,
Do you
but yeah,
input threaded plastic in this machine?
yes. So here I can show you.
Hmm.
So it has this like opening here, and you feed the thread through it. So I've got my little spool of plastic thread, and then it goes through here, and then it has a crank handle
Uh-huh.
on the side, and so you, I don't know if I can do it and hold it at the same time, but you just like crank this, and then it poops out a little tube. So
And this is like a machine, or like it's almost like a toy, and you had it as a child, right? And then you kind of
yeah.
invent it now
So
for.
this was the toy that my parents would always get for all of my friends for their birthdays, but they would never get for me, and I was always so jealous and angry. And so as an adult, I got my own. No, but I actually remembered this when I was in fashion school, and I was like, oh, like I don't have like a real machine knitter, but I could get one of these, and then I could knit all of my swatches like so much faster.
Yeah,
And ultimately, that didn't really work because you can only knit like kind of one type of knit. You can't do like a rib knit or patterns really, so
I
it didn't
see.
actually help me that much. But um, But then, a couple of years later, when I started working with plastic, I was able to revisit this and be like, oh yeah, this thing is great and I love
Yeah.
it. um, and yeah, so it kind of like works in tandem, like with the Wolverine Claw. So like that one comes first, where you're like
Yeah.
scratching through all the
First
plastic.
it
Yeah.
up,
hmm
put
And
it
then
on the
yeah,
machine.
and then the yarn like gets fed into here, and then it turns into one of these beautiful snake
Yeah,
legs.
that's something I show here too. So what Brett has behind her is a thing she makes using the Barbie knit machine. It's called the snake light, right? And they're kind of this woven plastic lights. And this is a fairly recent project of yours.
Yeah, it is. Here, I have another one that I can show you. Um, so yeah, I started experimenting with like lighting design and how I can incorporate light into my work. And I started thinking about this because plastic can be like really transparent, and you can get like a really nice sort of like translucency through it and really like nice colors. Um, and so like with the knitter, I started knitting these tubes and then feeding them into noodles. And uh, when you get a full noodle, you can kind of like tie it in a knot like this.
Yeah, I like
and um, and I have it connected to just like a portable cell phone battery, so you
that.
can
Mhm.
kind of like take it on the go with you and like use it as a nightlight. And if someone's bothering you in the street, just bop them. But
Yeah,
not really. Don't do
it's
that.
very,
But
and for everyone who doesn't know, like Brett is not in her studio right now. Like this is your home, correct? And
yeah,
it's so cool to see how you have put these snake lights and little tapestries in and kind of created your own landscape. Like you look like you're in this whimsical forest almost.
that's how I like to live, in a whimsical
Through
of
your
my.
art, that's lovely. So there's another technique I kind of wanted to ask you about. And also, yeah, you can get these snake lights from Brett, and I think you sell them by the foot, right?
Yeah, yeah. So they're all available by the foot. So I have some that are like really, really like short, that could just be like a little desk lamp or like night light. And then
Hmm.
like one behind me is about 12 feet long.
Yeah.
So here, I'll show you. I stuck a foam finger on the top. So it's number one. But
Yeah, that's cool that it's so large and like that you can manipulate the shape, kind of
yeah,
custom.
so
That's
yeah, and then it goes all around. But yeah. What was your next
all right.
question?
Well, oh, I came to think of it when you were talking about the translucent nature of plastic. I know that you also, perhaps more in the past, have experimented with like layering plastic using heat and an iron. And I have a picture of an example of your work here that's like almost plastic collage. And I wanted to ask you about the process of making something like this, like kind of layering plastic rather than attaching them or like knitting.
Yeah, so like as you can see in that one, it's a combination of a lot of different techniques. So there's some weaving and then some applique with the roses. People in New York will recognize the purple roses from all of the bodega bags. So I cut all of those out and then arranged them, and then used a heat press technique with an iron to like kind of like melt them all down together. And then I went in on top of it and kind of like embroidered into it. Um, and so I like it as a way of kind of creating a different sense of depth that you don't normally get just by like straight weaving or um, whatever. Like you're able to kind of like build it up, and because the plastic is kind of see through, like you can really see the different layers. And And then what's really nice is like when they're backlit in a window or outside or something, and then it really like brings it out. Um,
Yeah, and that plays into what you just said about being interested in manipulating light and light as well. Like I feel like plastic lends itself well to that.
yeah, definitely.
Much time at home, like the light you surround yourself with is quite
Yeah.
important. I wanted to show another example of you using this like heat press technique too that I just thought was very cool that I saw on your website.
Mhm.
This. I wish the image was a bit smaller, but I think that Brett here has layered like a very translucent plastic bag with these silvery strips, and it's actually portraying this drawing, right? The
Mhm.
beach. Is
Yeah.
this
So sorry.
no, I was gonna ask you, is this at the residency you were at Landcloud?
Yeah. So this was part of Land Cloud, and so it's Land Cloud is in Vinyl Haven, Maine, and it's on this granite island that they used to mine. So a lot of the granite in New York City came from this island. I found out, um, like in like the 1800s. Um, and so this is kind of like at the foot of one of the mountains. It's not like a real mountain. It's like a hill, like a granite hill. But it's looking out at the ocean, and you're getting some of the landscape. And then from there, I took that drawing and translated it into the plastic. So what you're seeing, all of the kind of white is land, and the silver is the water. But yeah, again, it's like using like all of the silver is like woven into it. So I very like meticulously cut like the verticals into the background, which is that clear bag, and then use the silver to go horizontally and fill it in, and then the white is a heat pressed bodega bags like onto it. And so I thought that would kind of capture some of the like rocky landscape and like give it, yeah, just give it more depth. And then like here, like it's photographed against just like a white wall, but I think like
Yeah.
ultimately I want it to be kind of like out in nature, and um and so you would get that kind of like layering of the artwork on over
Mhm.
like the natural landscape. And when I was making it, I was thinking about um kind of like uh kind of like garbage in the world and just how like you know a lot of oceanside has a lot of just like plastic trash. And so I think to to hang that outdoors and then have it be like outside like over this really beautiful natural landscape was interesting to me. And to be
Yeah.
like, you can manipulate what you find outside to become like an object of beauty, and like something to not just like discard. Yeah.
Yeah, I wanted to ask you a little bit more about the stay at Landcloud. I have this picture of you where you are salvaging, I think you're finding rope, right? Like
Yeah.
by the side. And I wanted to ask you, like, since New York now has this plastic, I mean, I'm sure you have a large library of plastic bags, but with the fairly recent, like, plastic bag ban, are you thinking of expanding to other raw materials, what you tried out here in the future?
Yeah. So yeah, like you were saying, like that photo was taken on the island at Land Cloud, and it's a fishing island, so there is a lot of like discarded rope and like kind of just like random bits of like lobster traps that got washed up. And so I collected a lot of that, and I've used some of it to like weave with, and then eventually I have some left over that I'd like to work with. But I, like as you were saying, like there's a plastic bag ban in New York. I'm not really worried about it.
Yeah.
Like yeah, like I do have a lot of like a stockpile basically of material. But I think once that's gone, I'll be happy to see it go. And I think there will always be, you know, materials that are available and in need of reuse. You know, as long as like humans are around, I feel like there's always going to be people like throwing shit out. So,
Yeah, for sure.
like,
Um,
go
I
ahead.
think this like approach of using ocean plastics, I think is really interesting because you recently had a show called Don't Eat This at Takumin Izakaya restaurant in Queens, where you kind of used plastic and your work to make this landscape that almost like appears like it's in a ship. You got to do the interior for this restaurant, and to me, it was very interesting how, like, the notion of plastic is something you would find in the ocean, but here you kind of take it back into the regular world to create this notion of like marine life. And I wanted to ask you, what was it like to create this kind of ship environment, and how was it working with light in a public space, like rather than for the home?
Yeah. So, um, when I was done with this install, my partner Dell said to me, "It looks like you set up a full moon party in this restaurant," and um, and I took that as a good thing. But really, what I wanted to do was kind of like take a space where, you know, like we've all been to a restaurant, like we all
Yeah.
kind of like
I
have a
think,
expectation of like what is inside, and I kind of wanted to subvert that and just have it be like a like, oh, surprise, like it's wild in here, and we're, you know, gonna kind of like reevaluate the space and like what it means to kind of like put art into like a more everyday context, you know, because it's like not a gallery, so like people aren't going there for the art, people are going there to eat, but how can
yeah.
you make that experience one that includes art and kind of, you know, centralizes it and makes it a fun, still enjoyable place to be, and like, you know, just kind of like reframing the atmosphere. um, and then I was really lucky. The owner of the restaurant gave me free reign, and they were like, "Yeah, you can do whatever." And I was like, "Thank you so much. I will." So yeah, it was a lot of fun to make like the giant snake lights and put them through the rafters, and I was kind of seeing that as like, you know, it's like a sea serpent kind of like coming in and out. Like the restaurant roof is pitched like that, and
Mhm.
so um, it just was like perfect for it. Like I've seen others, some other art in this particular restaurant, and no one had used the roof, and I was like, that is a missed opportunity. Like we are
Yeah.
getting up there. Um,
How did you come up with the name? Because the name of the show was Don't Eat This. Was it because this is like the one element that isn't normally in a restaurant?
well, I was thinking, so you know, so it's a Japanese restaurant. They serve sushi and they serve a lot of fish and a lot of like um, a lot of other food too. But just like thinking about like the ocean and plastic in the water, and just being like, oh, like you definitely like do not want to be eating this, and uh, and just like thinking about it in like a more like ecological way, um, and just being like, yes, this is like really like bright and fun and like candy colored, but it's like not, it's not for like touching, you know.
Yeah. Like
Uh,
this piece, I really, really like this piece. It's very like whimsical and colorful, yet this element of the kind of netting makes it feel more serious. Like it looks like a net for fishing that someone has pulled up out of the ocean, but it has like a pom pom and all these colorful, fun things, yet it has a serious undertone to it, I think.
Yeah. So actually, one thing that I didn't mention was like the silver amoebas that you're seeing. Like there's one in that piece, and there's a couple like throughout. Yeah, like that. So those are based off of these plastic eating microbes that are found in the ocean.
Hmm.
Um, and they've been found to like help break down plastic, um, like on a microscopic level. So, um, like there's still not enough of them to break down all of the plastic in the world, but I was kind of like, I was thinking about those microbes and then kind of like blowing them up and being like, oh, what if this was like a really like huge thing that could, because it's like a thing that eats the thing that you're not supposed to. It like eats the
Yeah.
plastic and like even though like nothing is supposed to be able to eat it, it can. And so
That's
I think to me that was like really hopeful and
yeah.
um and even yeah, and like by calling the exhibition like don't eat this, like there's still kind of like an underlying like subversion where it's like, oh, but you actually can. Like like
Yeah, this
people can, but like these amoebas can.
I like that you made them so large in relation to all this like intricate weaving. I'm gonna show a close-up of like a smaller little weaving piece you made so people can see what these pieces look like very up close, like how much, how intricate it is really. And here, did you experiment with putting a net into this kind of weft of plastic bags?
Yeah, so I've been trying to kind of like see like what else I can kind of layer into it and work with. And so that like green net inside of it, if you've ever like bought a bottle of wine and then they put that plastic
Or around it? Yeah.
net around it, that's what that is. So I like cut it open and into a shape and then wove through it with all of these different plastics. And then I melted it down. So that one,
Ooh.
like, I actually ran it through a laminator. Like, you can run it
Mhm.
through a laminator with like protective like paper on either side, so it doesn't
Yeah.
melt into it. But yeah.
And these are quite small, right? Like due to Instagram technology, like this is very zoomed in, but what is the real scale of these like smaller tapestries you made?
Yeah, these smaller ones are about 12 by 12 inches, so it's about a foot square.
Yeah.
They're quite small, but I think it's a good format for me to be able to try out different methods and techniques, and also, like, if I don't like something, I can like take it apart really easily. And it's really like my testing ground for bigger works that go on from there.
Yeah, these are so cool. Like
Thank you.
the layering in itself makes them look so fluid. Like definitely relates back to the ocean once again, I feel. Like a
Yeah.
lot in these pieces. Um, but recently you've also done some textile experiments, right? Oh, sorry.
Yeah.
Um, I wanted to talk more about that. We can first perhaps just go back quickly to the quilting that you talked about had been like a tradition in your family because you recently made this piece because you've been experimenting a bit at home with textile. You want to tell us about that?
Sure. Well, I guess it's important for me to say that I do try to work with all recycled materials when I can. So these fabrics all came from an interior design firm that was throwing out their swatch samples. And so I was able to take them and then reform them into a quilt. And yeah, I've made this in the last maybe 2 or 3 weeks. And it's been boiling hot in New York City, and this whole quilt is velvet, so it's been really
Is that
hot to make. But but yeah, it's something that I like enjoyed working on, and tried to like challenge myself by sewing like the circles, like sewing curves is always a challenge, and playing with color. Uh, is something that I'm always like, trying to so.
But this is on a sewing machine, right?
Yeah, so this is on a sewing machine. I don't know. It's really funny. Like, I have all the patience in the world when it comes to like plastic and like working with that, but when it comes to like actual fabric, I'm just like, no, no, go. Just like, I don't really have the patience to like hand sew,
That's almost.
and so it's all done on the machine.
Oh, sorry, did I cut out for a bit?
Yeah, just a second.
Okay, well, I was saying, yeah, I feel like sewing with a machine seems so much faster. That's a very fast and almost like intimidating process, at least if you're using an industrial sewing machine. But you prefer slow-paced work, correct? Like in general.
Yeah, I think like, overall, I like taking my time and I do a lot of like thinking. So I'll set something up and, just like look at it for like weeks or months or, however long, and then finally like settle on something and then go forward. I think because a lot of my materials, are like individual pieces. It's like a scrap that I got from somebody. So I'm like weirdly precious about it, or I'm like, oh, do I really want to use this here? Like, I only have one. Like,
Yeah.
should I save it better? Which is like kind of counterintuitive because I started working with recycled materials specifically so I wouldn't have to be precious about it. And, it wouldn't be like, ooh, I'm like only working in porcelain and it's like super like expensive and like delicate or whatever.
Yeah.
I was like, more plastic, and if you drop it, it's not gonna break.
True.
Yeah.
Speaking of dropping stuff and they won't break, I saw that you've also made these like smaller kind of soft sculpture like this. And so you're like experimenting with shapes too, because a lot of the work we looked at so far is flat, like against the wall. So what's it like making more three-dimensional objects?
Yeah. So I was thinking about kind of like stuffed animals, and then thinking about like how I could make kind of like stuffed objects that were kind of like just as fun as stuffed animals, but without being so like figurative and like realistic. So I started making these little like fluffy pillows.
Yeah,
So
it's so cute. It's like stuffed animals for adults, like
it's
grown-ups.
like little accordion, kind of like um, I think that they're like enough of a shape to like be a thing, but also just like enough of like to not be at all, and you're like, oh, that's just like a thing. But yeah, I've been calling these my circle pillows, and I imagine like it's the perfect thing to take on an airplane and just like sleep against the window, you know? And
Yeah, or
like,
on the New York subway, once
yeah,
it's a bit more accessible and
or
cleaner, you
you
can just
hang
lean
your head
against the window.
out, just, you know.
These are so fun. Are these also with the recycled material? Because I imagine you need like larger pieces of one fabric to make things like this.
Yeah, you do need kind of like more, but like this came from a leather jacket that I no longer wear, and like this was a pair of pants. It's denim.
Cool.
So I don't know. Yeah, I feel like I'm really trying to like find ways to use what I already have and just like repurpose it. So whenever I'm like, oh, I'm never gonna wear this again, what can I turn it into? I feel like that's the vibe that I'm on right now.
That's the
And
vibe.
looking
Yeah.
forward.
I feel like that was also kind of like a common denominator for many people, at least in New York, during the lockdown and quarantine, like when you basically couldn't get out to get supplies, or maybe you would only leave your home to go to the grocery store, like utilizing the things you have at home. Like I feel like that kind of inspires a lot of creativity or causes creativity to happen when you have to work with what you have.
Uh, I'm right there.
Yeah, I
Like
think
quarantine, I've been like, oh, can't go to Blick, can't go to Midtown and get fabric, can't do anything. So yeah, it's really just been like, do I still wear these pants? No. Okay, we're cutting them.
That's lovely. And the Wolverine Claw was also made out of scraps. I think you just told me in past, like, or something your friend was gonna throw out, the dowels and the wood.
Yeah, so I don't know. I feel like once you accept like one thing, like the whole universe knows that you'll like take stuff. So I feel like whenever any of my friends are like getting rid of something, they'll be like, "Oh, do you want this? Like, do you want this thing?" Like now I just have a reputation. But yeah, which I don't mind. It's good for me. Um, but yeah, my friend Francois had a product design studio and um, was moving from New York back to Europe,
I'll
and
show the tool here
um,
again.
yeah, and so I was able to like get a lot of materials from him. So like that dowel across the top and like the end cuts of wood all came from him, and then
Mm-hmm.
yeah, and then my partner Dell is a skilled carpenter, and so he was able to help kind of like realize my design, um, and we were able to do some like troubleshooting together. And yeah, so the only thing that I actually like purchased for this was the blades itself.
Yeah.
But yeah, everything, all the other materials were recycled.
I actually wanted to ask you about the blades. Like, you can all see them here by my mouse, but do you have to replace these a lot? Like, do they go dull, and how do you do that? Because it seems a bit scary, like with 20 sharp blades to do that.
So I haven't replaced the blades yet. It is possible. So the blades are all on a dowel on like a threaded bar, and so there's just like a bolt on the end that you can undo and then pull the whole thing out, and then all of the blades will come out. Yeah, there.
Oh, yeah.
And so then you can replace all of them or just one if you need to. But I assume when it comes time to replace the blades, I'll just do all of them. I think actually the hardest part was finding blades that had a big enough hole to put the dowel through.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, like the threaded bar through. So
Was it a lot of trial and error, like getting the right dimensions?
yeah, like I started out by just making like a 3-blade one and bolting it together. And then I was really just like pinching it and like dragging it through like that. And then I was like, no, I need like a handle in order to protect my hands and
Yeah, definitely.
yeah. Um, but yeah, I think like the hardest part about the Wolverine Claw currently is just getting even pressure when you're pulling through it. Because like sometimes if you're not using enough pressure or like it's not evenly distributed enough, you can end up with like gaps in the cuts, which
Like
then
parts that didn't get cut all the way through.
yeah, which is annoying, but it doesn't happen that often, so it's okay.
Okay, yeah, you're probably like very professional with it now. So we only have 10 minutes left, and I want to tell the people that are watching that if you have any questions for Brett, like feel free to ask them, and we'll try to answer them about her techniques or ways of working. But I also just wanted to mention the fact that you've been working on something quite different from the material studies, which is you're doing this like podcast with Britt Mosley and Sean Patel called Half and Half. And it's both like music and kind of performance, right? Do you want to tell us a bit about that?
Sure. Yeah, so Half and Half is it's a podcast. It's like a fictional narrative podcast, and it's about two brothers who move from New York City to a farm and start dairy farming. And it's like they are just totally clueless and don't know like what's happening. So it's about them learning and like getting to know the cows, getting to know the other townspeople. Um, so yeah, it's a fictional narrative. There's a lot of like music and a lot of different sound design, and then myself and Britt and Sean do all the writing, acting, and producing. So yeah, the first episode is available now online. There's one on. There's a link to it on my Instagram, I think, and the second and third episodes are in the works. So stay tuned.
Cool. And it's called Half and Half, right? Like, and you
Yeah.
can listen to it on Spotify. So that's very interesting. It feels like a kind of a new thing you're trying out. Performance, like, I mean, even though probably it's pre-recorded, like, seems just quite intimidating as an art form. But are you feeling good about it, like doing skits and kind of acting?
Yeah, I think really I've been surprised at like the writing aspect. Like I've never really thought of myself as a writer or kind of like a creator in that way. But I've really been enjoying it, and I feel like starting to really get into it. And then I think like as long as the writing is good, then I feel more confident about like the acting side because like doing just like straight improv like right now is like kind of intimidating, but when there's like a script and you're just like, oh okay, this is easy. It's like you act surprised, you act sad, you do whatever. So yeah, I feel like as long as we can write kind of like strong narratives, then I feel good about it. I'm into it. So
And you've
yeah.
worked with John Patella before, correct? Like, he's your very close friend, and you guys did this benefit for the Museum of the Chinese in America together, where you sold some of your work, right?
Yeah, so Harrison, Brad is and I did the benefit for the Museum of Chinese in America. And then our friend Britt Mosley, who I work on the podcast with, had some work in that show. But yeah, Harrison and I put together an art show and like retail store at the beginning of the year before COVID happened, and it was to showcase a lot of our friends' artwork and like creative projects, and to help kind of like sell their work and promote it. And then part of the proceeds from that went to the Museum of Chinese in America, which had a big fire in the
Yeah.
archive at the beginning of the year. So yeah, and so all of that money went to their restoration effort. But yeah, like one of my favorite things to do like is to just support my friends and help people like get their work out there and you know get paid. So
Yeah. And all
so
the pieces we've looked at here, like your smaller tapestries and the snake lights, they're for sale, correct, through you as well? Yeah.
yeah, yeah,
Speaking
yeah,
of getting paid, like,
yeah.
thought we could plug that. So you can buy a small tapestry from Brett or a snake light, and the very cool Wolverine Claw is actually also for sale through Special Special as a one-of-a-kind item or tool. So we only have around 6 minutes left because Instagram puts a time limit to these things. And is there something that you want to speak about, like as a last sentiment, or that you want to highlight out of your practice that you're especially interested in now?
Um, yeah. I mean, I guess just to highlight, I've just always been really interested in like recycling as a means, uh, and we'll just continue with that. And if anybody has any plastic bags that they'd like to give me, please do. I'm really collecting, um, and uh, I don't know. Yeah, I think I'm just gonna continue like working with like these kind of like color studies and also like um, just methods of stuff. So like yeah, like the net I showed you was a new thing, um, and I just see a lot more like experimentation like that coming down the pipe. So
Yeah, it's lovely seeing you here with like all your works in the background that also feel like places you in the context of your art in a different way. I appreciate you setting this little corner up for our interview.
Yeah, totally. I mean, it kind of looks like this most of the time, so
Yeah.
it's not set up. But I know. But yeah, sometimes I'm like, oh, maybe I am just like living in my stuff like too much. But I think overall, it's a good thing. And I like being able to see like what I've made and like kind of how it relates back on itself. So yeah.
Um, so I think that we're gonna wrap up the interview.
Yeah.
Um, close to the time limit, but I want to thank you, Brett, for joining me, for giving us a little peep into your practice and the techniques you use to manipulate plastic. I think that's been very interesting to hear about. And thank you, everyone who watched.
Thank you, Ellen, and special. This was great, and thanks everyone for watching. Yeah, I'm so excited.
Okay, bye.
Okay, bye.